I'm standing in the doorway with a bag of chips because it's one of those potluck affairs, and I can't exactly bring a scrambled egg or a bowl of cereal. And if I have to cook something, I figure I might as well just stay at home and make enough to eat all week, which actually sounds a whole lot better than mingling with a crowd of people I don't know, or maybe have met before, but have to reintroduce myself because I left no impression the first time around. The hosts haven't spotted me yet, so I could still back out the door and drive to some quiet bar for a bowl of stale popcorn and a cold beer and stare blissfully at whatever nonsense is playing on the TV, but I don't. I stand there wondering where to put the bag of chips and end up opening the bag of chips and munching, so I'll have something to do besides stand in the doorway looking awkward. The chips are pretty tasty, and I'm not sure why anyone would frown upon bringing them to a potluck, but I'm pretty sure if anyone remembers me at all, it's as the guy who always brings chips to the potluck. No homemade avocado dip or salsa, no clever corn chip casserole or frito fabuloso, just chips. In this case, sea salt and vinegar, which are absolutely going to wreak havoc with my acid reflux. Still, I keep shoving them into my mouth in an attempt to look both inconspicuous and busy so I don't have to talk to anybody. But a girl about 7 or 8 who must not have gotten the memo about this being a grown-ups only event walks up to me and says, "Those chips must be pretty good." And I say, "Why is that?" And she says, "Because you've gone through half a bag in less than 5 minutes." And I say, "What, are you timing me?" And she nods and points to her sparkly neon watch, and I say, "Oh, you want some?" And she says, "Sure," but grimaces at the taste and says, "Yuck, how do you eat these things? They're nasty." And I say, "I think they're pretty great." And she shrugs, and we both stand there in the doorway, staring at the grown-ups expertly swirling their wine and chatting away.
That was Kurt Sobolik, and you're listening to another episode of Poets in Montana. I'm Mark Gibbons, and today we're going to have a chance to talk to Kurt, who is an old friend of mine and a Montana poet, obviously, but he's a voice poet. I think that's one of the most incredible aspects of your work, Kurt. And yeah, I mean, the book that that poem he just read, all that is the first book in this collection of poems called Homespun, which was in the first edition, or the first poet in the last edition of the Montana Poets series. So
which you edited.
Pardon me?
Which you edited.
Yes, which I edited, exactly. Right. And I mean, and of course, I've been hounding you for about 10 years to put together a manuscript of poems, because you're such of a stingy poet.
Well, you know, you finally lassoed me with your Poet Laureate, so that must be what it was. So.
Well, let's whatever. We'll take whatever we can get to get a collection of poems like this. I've been giving this book around to a lot of different people, and the response that I always get back is, "Oh, I love that book," you know, because it's an entertainment as much as it is a book of poetry.
Yeah, well, I hope it's entertaining. I mean, that the whole reason I really write is because I enjoy it. You know, if it doesn't really tickle my brain cells, then I'm not particularly interested. So hopefully that some of that transfers, you know, to the page and back to the reader again. So.
Yeah, and I know one of the things that I mean, other people that I've given the work to, I mean, this particular book and these voice poems, because I mean, you've been writing poetry for a long time, so you've written other kinds of poems besides
Sure.
this particular form of these new sort of voice poems you've been working on for the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, maybe, or
yeah, something like that. I don't know the exact
yeah,
time.
and one of the things, you know, they'll say to me, or they'll ask me is, "Well, is that poetry?"
I asked myself that too, so no harm there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's like, I mean, even poets have said things like, well, why isn't it just prose poetry? Why is it, why does it have the form it has? Because I mean, that's the other thing that we can't, I guess, show in a program like this,
Right.
oral experience.
Well, I guess because I started out writing what you would call normal poetry with normal lines, and when I started writing these, I kept doing the same thing. But we had this discussion a long time ago, you and I tried blocking them out and putting them in prose form, and they, to me, they didn't have the energy. I wasn't getting. I like to push the line, from one line to the next as much as I can, and um, I wasn't getting that from just having them in a chunk of words, So I just keep doing what I'm doing, and I guess if people wonder or like it, great. If not, well, what can I do?
No,
So,
yeah, I know. I mean, I think, because we have had this talk before about this, and I came to the conclusion myself that it is the poet's sensibility that crafts the poem on the page the way it's crafted, and I think I can hear it actually when I hear the poem even read out loud, even though it sounds just like like a little movie or like a conversational snippet. I
right.
can hear the rhythms in the lines when I hear it read out loud.
Well, good.
I read it out loud, and I can certainly see it on the page when I read it because, I mean, it's just the natural sort of a bit of a breath at the end of each line, which allows this kind of phrasing and rhythm to build itself in the poem. And it's difficult. It's more difficult for me to pick up on that in a straight on prose poem.
Right. Yeah. It tends to be, I mean, it has its rhythm, but it's, for lack of a better word, more monotone or something going across, or, less.
Yeah, and maybe people who have not been practiced sort of in the old sort of uh, art of poetry, like writing in lines. Maybe those folks, like people who started out writing basically prose,
Right.
really focused on the line and the language, and they have this great beautiful rhythm. And I think of like David Cates and Deborah Erling and all kinds of prose writers that I know, that I think their work is just it's just like poetry almost, but it's different.
Right.
When,
Well, and then Jim Welch, wrote for me, the death of Jim Loney. He started as a poet, but his novels definitely have a poetic flavor or rhythm to them. So,
I think so too. Yeah.
right.
And yeah, so anyway, we'll get back to more poems from Homespun, I'm sure. Is there something from earlier on,
Yeah.
or yeah?
Yeah. So, well, because me, it takes a cannon to shoot me out of my house to go any place. I'm a homebody. So, quite a while ago, I wrote this poem that sort of addresses that. It's called These Boots. Every once in a while, like maybe after I've read On the Road for the 10th time, or I've listened to a few too many Woody Guthrie tunes, or I've just gotten plain tired of traveling the same miles over, I start thinking I should pack a rucksack, fill it with loose lips and clipper ships, philosophy and cheese, a ham sandwich on rye, crooked dice, rice pudding, the Encyclopedia Britannica, signed portraits of Buzz Aldrin and Boxcar Willie, my great grandmother's doily collection, and maybe a cinnamon toothpick or two, and just start walking in an outwardly direction. It doesn't matter where. Maybe I'll turn my back on the Rocky Mountain front, throw a curve into the Strait of Gibraltar, scrape the blame off the San Andreas Fault, deliver bifocals to the Galapagos Islands, cook up some flapjacks on the Himalayan range. Who knows? I'll just go, be on the move, moving somewhere, following my feet wherever they take me, I'll freak out, paint my face, grow my beard, pierce my nipples, smoke cannabis at every step of the way. And oh my God, it'll be pure, unadulterated rainbows and moonbeams bliss. Oh, I think this, but every time I lace up my boots, strap on my pack, and start walking, I make it about as far as my mailbox before the band attaching my umbilical to my front doorstep grows taut, stretches, and snaps me back home, back to my comfort zone, back to a cold beer and a soft recliner, back to an open window and a warm breeze, back to leaves shimmering in the sunlight, back to simply sitting there doing nothing, but taking it all in, lumbering after the hippopotamus of my mind.
Oh, that's terrific, man. That's a great poem. I remember that poem but it's been a long time. That's a great poem. All that cataloging and plus just all the personal within all of that wonderful array of language and imagery. Yeah, that's a great poem. I've reminded me I'm in this room because as you know, I'm departing the premises that I'm in right now. So I've been pulling crap down and a lot of your homemade broadsides are in this room too. One of them being Carradine.
Oh,
you have that poem handy?
Well, let me see if I can find it. I don't have it in front of me, but let me see if I can find it quick. Dun, dun, dun. Give my computer a second to catch up here and we'll. Okay. Carradine. Kwai Chang Caine hanged himself while masturbating in the closet of a luxury hotel in Bangkok. Kill your idols, somebody said, before they disappoint, embarrass themselves, become fodder for the evening news. Maybe all those years in Hollywood, he could no longer hear the sound of grasshoppers at his feet.
Yeah, much different poem.
Yeah, I just write. It's not like I still don't write that type of poem. I just, right. That first collection, I just gathered the voicier stuff together and put that there. So,
right.
And I apologize if I pronounced the name wrong on that. I can't, it's been a long time since I watched Kung Fu on TV. So,
yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, quite a while.
We used to, so I grew up in Great Falls, and at Sunday afternoons, I think it was the Lethbridge station, we would get Kung Fu Theater. So I would watch that if I was home. So,
wow.
A fan. And yeah. I watched it in the 70s too, when it first came out. But I think it was 70s, or was it 60s?
No, it would have been the 70s. Yeah. And I don't remember exactly when. It must have been, because I was kind of out of the television world. I mean, I would catch episodes of it here and there when I would come in contact with a television the night that it was on and whatnot.
Right.
I remember watching, several episodes over the years, but I don't even know how many seasons it was on, but
I don't either offhand.
It was certainly a very popular program, and I think it was kind of right around the time, maybe just prior to and or including the time he made that Bound for Glory movie. Carradine played Woody Guthrie, and that was a great film too.
I don't think I ever saw it, but
it's a good movie. Yeah, good Depression movie, Depression era.
Well, do you want me to read another one from Homespun, maybe?
Yeah.
Or do you have something else in mind?
No, anything. Yeah, anything you want to go to. Throw us another one, and then I'll stumble away from that one and come back at you.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. All right, this one is called Jerry's Kids. Dolores called in drunk, and one of the other volunteers handed her off to me because she is my sister and all. So there I am on the TV screen looking like I'm taking pledges for Jerry's kids when I'm really just trying to calm Dolores down. She's had a tough go of it. Her cat Leroy died recently after a short bout with leukemia, and she hasn't had any place else to put all that love. Her coping mechanisms have never been great, and she's taken to drinking wine coolers as soon as the clock strikes noon. Normally, she's passed out in her chair by the final clue in Jeopardy, but for some reason, she's gotten a second wind and wound herself up thinking about Jerry's kids, which led to missing Leroy. I didn't mind much. I wasn't getting many pledges anyway, just pretending like I was every time they turned the cameras on, like they told us to. Besides, Dolores had been there for me when Sheila left, and I felt like I owed her. So I just talked to her quiet like while she sniffled. And in the end, I told her I'd pledge $10 in Leroy's name and have the host read it over the air, which seemed to cheer her up a bit. I told her we could go down to the pound on Tuesday to look for another kitty if she liked, and she said she'd think about it, but didn't know if she was quite ready yet. Then I asked her if she thought she'd be okay, and she said, "I'll be fine, honey. You better get back to those poor kids." She said she'd stay up to hear Leroy's name, but she was already nodding off as our call ended, so I doubted she'd be awake to hear it. The studio folks were kind enough to make me a tape of the announcement so Dolores can play it whenever she wants. I think she'll appreciate that. It was a slow night, what with the economy and all, but we did manage to raise $12,000 for Jerry's kids. Sure is good to see folks still help out when they can.
Nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good empathetic voice. It's rather soothing where we're at right now in the world.
Yeah.
The idea of just helping out your neighbor, you know.
As best you can, even if it is only $12,000 for Jerry's kids.
and spending $10 and Elmer, whoever it was, name.
Leroy.
Yeah, you know, I know you you started into those these poems that had these great sort of character driven voices and personalities, and we talked before, I believe, you know, they started, a lot of them started fairly young, and then they seemed to evolve into work related experiences. I mean, you know, that's where we spend half of our life, right?
Right.
Work related experiences, and you know, a kind of a combination of that too is the old the gummy poem.
Oh, yeah.
Called the triptych or whatever of
right.
Tight. You got any of those things handy?
Yeah, they're in the bonus tracks of the book. So.
Of course they are. Yeah, they're in the bonus track. Yeah.
Well, I'll just read the first one of those. How's that sound?
Yeah.
It's called On the Job Training. I ain't never sawed no tree before, and as I'm looking up at the crown of a monster Doug fir, I'm thinking, fuck Newton's apple. Gravity can kill your ass. Normally old Gummy takes care of shit like this, but he's laid up in the hospital with a cough that won't quit, so now the job falls to me. And here I am hoping against all hope the damn thing don't fall on me. I know everything there is to moving cows and baling hay, but by golly, this tree chopping's a mystery to me. The boss man's worried that fir's going to come down on his well house and he'll lose a few days irrigation, so he wants it down no matter what. I don't care, figure it out, he says. So that's where I'm at. Not exactly sure which ends up or where it'll land, and as usual, more driven by dollars than cents. So I fire up the saw once I figured out how the choke works, and I bore into that old trunk with the tip like I seen Gummy do once. And it feels a little soft midway through, but I'm not exactly sure what to do with that knowledge. So I just make me a notch on the face as best I can, and then I rev her up and fire into the backside, and I'm about a quarter of the way through when damned if that fucker don't decide to barber chair on me. Luckily, I hear the trunk start to crack and know enough to drop the saw and hightail it out of the way. goddamn mother humping shit, I swear, and rattle off a fuckity fuck, fuck, fuck. It's for extra measure. And by gosh, by golly, that old fur sure doesn't look pretty when it snaps, crackles, and drops, but at least it don't smash the well house when it lands. And after, I make sure I've still got all my fingers and toes and nothing extra rattling around my britches. I saw it off. I saw off the snaggletooth end of that stump and smooth it out so it'll look like I knew what I was doing if anyone ever thinks to check back. And I buck her up and call it a day, hoping now I can go back to feeding cows and mending fences, and old Gummy will get his wind back before some rotted out tree needs sod again. Because I know I'm a damn sight better at bucking bales than I am at bucking trees. And collecting a day's pay is a damn sight easier when you're alive than when you're planted under some tree with your shit kickers pointing up at the sky.
Oh yeah, yeah. We had this conversation. I had this conversation with a couple of our other poets and friends, and of course, I would say people that lean towards this the vernacular or the blue collar side of life, because a lot of people think it's I guess unique for poems to come from these people, to give voice to these people, even though the tradition's been around for a long time.
Right.
Most of the poetry that we've been exposed to, particularly in schools and in education, has been of a much higher and more refined location, Yes, exactly.
That's true.
Yeah.
But thank God for Robert Service and people like that, so.
Yeah, and I, everybody, I know I have a few friends or relatives that refer to me or what I do in terms of writing to their friends who are obviously more used to that level of academic, respectable sort of literature as a cowboy poet, they call me. Because those hayseeds out in Montana,
we must all be. I know you did write one poem that had cowboys on your bed sheets when you were a kid, but that's as far as I'd call you a cowboy, so.
But I guess humor has a lot to do with that. Cowboy poetry is full of humor, and they like their music too. So I mean, if you like to mess around with sound in a poem, yeah, those cowboy poets are famous for that. But
yeah, I was just thinking about somebody being out of their element, and I don't know where it all comes from, but usually the first line pops in, and then I just go from there, and that's what it turned into. I didn't set out to being, writing any particular vernacular. That's the way it works sometimes. So.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you here because we've talked about this before too, in regard to, we all have to write from what we have, the tools we have, but that comes from a lot of variety of different sources. So a lot of it's personal experience, and then a lot of it's stuff you've read. The imagined scenarios. These homespun is full of such a variety of voices, male, female, old, young, who have these experiences, and they're fictions, right?
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Just because that's the voice I hear, so I roll with that, and they're more interesting than most of my stories. So.
Right.
Why not make them up? So
right, but the fictions come from everything that you've had experience with.
Oh yeah, how can it not?
Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of the thing that I guess.
Sometimes the voice is more hee-haw than other times. It just depends on what I hear, and I try to reel that in because it's so easy to fall into that all the time. But I stand by it anyways. I'll hee-haw my way through life if I have to. So
well, it's like it's that we all need a laugh once in a while, and
absolutely.
Just to prove that you aren't, just a complete goddamn Buck Owens spinoff. Why don't you read us a semi more serious toned poem.
Okay. Well, here's a short one called How It Happens. It's interesting. A guy finds a little satisfaction at work for the first time in his life, and suddenly his fantasies of living out of a backpack, of building geodesics off the grid, of constructing solar panels out of green peace and fresh air suddenly dissipate. And he realizes he really does like hot showers, toilet paper, that morning espresso. And he knows he's been co-opted by the money changers, the swindlers, the captains of industry. But he understands that next to love, comfort is the best thing he has. So he buys himself a new suit, new shoes, and a shiny new SUV. And he drives onward and upward, cursing the heavy traffic, the rough grades, the sudden blind curves, hands at 10 at 2, a death grip on the wheel, tailgating the American dream.
There you go. Yeah. Which makes me think of, yeah, because so many, like I say, so many of your poems wind up in these workaday world experiences, because I mean, I think that's, that I'm sure that they certainly appeal to me, having been someone who lived in a workaday world most of their life, and I would guess that they really appeal to that same kind of an audience. You know, the poems like, well, the jackpot or the bloodlines, the deadlines,
Right.
poems, any some. I would love to hear another one of those.
Sure.
You got one in you? Not that I don't want to direct you like a goddamn orchestra here, but
Please do. Whatever you want to hear, I'm good. I mean, I've heard them all before, so doesn't matter to me. But I just got to find it. Let's do Bloodlines. How's that sound?
Yeah.
I'm kneeling on the concrete underneath the catwalk, trying to connect the switch wires to the slide out motor in a travel trailer I'll never be able to afford, especially now with the child support and alimony payments. But hydraulic fluid keeps dripping onto the wires, making them slippery, and I can't quite feel the connectors because the goddamn Band-Aid wouldn't stay on my finger, and I'd had to wrap it in an electrical tape to stop the bleeding. And I keep losing my grip on the wires and dropping the connectors while the dickheads up on the catwalk keep smacking my arms and the back of my head with their air hoses because they're behind and trying to finish attaching the hole in our station. And rather than risk losing my weekly production bonus by yanking their ignorant asses off the catwalk, I decide to stand up and take a deep breath before I try again. Only as I'm straightening up, I drive my head into the corner bracing of the catwalk, and the blood starts streaming down my big bald melon like it's an ice cream cone melting in the sun. And as the trailer moves on to the next station, I'm left thinking about the safety bonus I was counting on to catch me up on my truck payments. And I just stand there in the dust and cast off bits of insulation and let it bleed.
Yeah, the futility of those situations, and the attempted humor through the description of the whole thing, and because what else can you do but laugh? You're so goddamn mad,
right?
I think so many working people can identify with that goddamn poem.
Yeah. That's the idea, I guess.
Yes, it is. That's a good poem.
You want me to, how about I read Roadside Assistance?
Sure.
Okay. My tire goes flat, so I turn down a side street and pull over to the curb, but the lug nut is fused to the stud, so I have to call the tire shop for help. They send out a guy who fills the tire with enough air to get my car to their shop, where they hoist it up and get to work. I'm sitting in the waiting room, grimacing through the worst cup of coffee imaginable, half watching some morning show with the sound off, but the captions on, and half fretting about the stack of invoices waiting on my desk when my boss calls my cell and says, "Where the fuck are you, numbnuts?" And I say, "I got a flat tire." And he says, "Sure you do. You're probably hanging around the mini mart harassing that new counter girl you were telling me about." And I say, "No, really, I got a flat and I'm waiting for them to fix it." And he says, "Oh, bullshit." And I say, "What do you fucking want? A note from my mechanic?" And he says, "Yeah," and hangs up on me. So I walk out into the shop and have the tire guy snap a photo of me standing in front of my car, flipping the bird with both hands, and send it to my boss. And he texts me back, "Where's your safety glasses, dickweed?" And I text him back, probably next to my hearing protection. And he texts me back, "Yeah, you must have lost them the last time you had your head up your ass." And I laugh and resend him the photo of me flipping both birds and go back to sipping my now cold coffee and wondering if I can sneak in a visit to the mini mart on my way back to the plant.
Yeah, it shows a lot of different things besides humor and personality but just your ability to create that short movie and it's kind of a pitch perfect ear for dialogue and humor. I mean, so much of our communication, I think, happens through this humor. At least that's been my experience out here in the West.
Yeah, definitely in the work world. You know, when I've done more service oriented or blue collar type jobs, there's a lot more wisecracking and
So
giving each other crap, and yeah, that whole thing. It still happens elsewhere, but it's more so, and especially like when I worked in restaurant, that's the only way to survive really in that environment. So
verbal banter.
exactly right. It makes the shift go.
So here, I guess, I mean, these are kinds of things that maybe other people would be interested in. Are you, who do you read, or who are people? How did you get started? Where did poetry come into your frame of reference?
Yeah, so I had the usual from school, and by school I mean primary through high school.
Mm-hmm.
Was actually a poli sci major in college and was interested in that, but still loved literature. But it wasn't really till after I graduated, didn't know what to do with myself, was working as a retail manager, and I just kind of had this existential crisis where I figured I got to do something, and I had thought about writing, but always just kind of put it off. But then at that, I kind of finally had a moment where I just got off my butt and just started writing stuff, and some of it came out story-ish and some of it came out poemish, and I didn't really know what was what. I just wrote it, and then came across a group of people who had this sort of Dead Poet Society thing that they did at some nights during the week. So I joined them and I read some of that, and people seemed to like it, which that just motivated me, I guess, to keep writing more. And
where were you at that time?
At that time, well, initially when I first started writing, I was in Arizona, and I'd moved back to Great Falls for a short time, and that's where I came across a group of people there. Mm-hmm. I was only in Great Falls for about a year and a half, and then I moved off to Oregon, worked on a farm, and did some other things, and so it was more solitary there. But I started submitting some of the stuff I wrote, and some small journals, published it, which gave me more motivation, at the time. So I just kind of kept writing, and then moved to Missoula, met you. And so then I suddenly had a poetry pal, pen pal or whatever. Then we started exchanging poems. So I had an audience, and just kind of evolved. Part of it was what you liked, part of it was what I liked, and just went from there, I guess. I don't really, it's kind of not no MFA programs, no classes, none of that. I guess I just tried to figure out what I liked,
Yeah.
what I was reading, I mean, what really got me into poetry was Richard Hugo, uh, an accessible guy, great use of language, um, certainly a narrative aspect to his poems and that. And so that's where I really got interested in poetry itself.
Mhm.
He was kind of my gateway into it. And then read other poets from there.
Right.
Found, the Beats, and then found Bukowski, and, you, and then the local guys, Dave Thomas and Robert Lee, things like that, so it just kind of, over time, it just kind of
Right.
turned into something, I guess. So.
Yeah. That was that was. And when did you, just out of curiosity, and this has nothing to do with anybody in the poetry world, but when did you bump into Scott? Because he was kind of the person that we both knew, and when I met you.
Right. Scott Matthews.
Yeah.
And he and I worked together at a company he was the first job I had when I moved back to Missoula, and we met at there. So basically from not too long after I came back to Missoula, I met Scott, and we just have always hung out since that time. So
and it worked.
He knew you through his uncle Al, who recently passed away.
Right.
And so that's kind of how that started, I guess. So.
Yeah, for some reason, when you and I realized that you first met, like Scott through a work experience, I flashed on that the poem about working in the restaurant, and you mentioned that you worked in a lot of restaurants, but
I worked in a restaurant multiple times. So I worked throughout high school, and then I worked in the summers during college. Okay. And then I worked, other than that, I worked at the food service at the university. So, but spent a fair amount of time in restaurants. So do you want me to read that?
Yeah, that Jimmy, with that one with Jimmy and the.
Yeah, I'll do it. Let me just find it here. Okay, this one's called Upward Mobility. Bridget says Jimmy's out emptying the trash, but I know damn well he's sitting on a 5-gallon bucket behind the dumpster smoking a bowl, when what I really need him to be doing is peeling another 10 pounds of shrimp and pounding veal for the night crew so they won't run out midway through dinner rush. I know he's out there lighting up because I used to cover for him before my ex-girlfriend got pregnant and Donnie promoted me to kitchen supervisor. Megan was just Catholic enough not to consider an abortion, so she waited tables until she couldn't anymore, and I've been trying to earn what I can to help with the expense. Not that I'll be able to cover the cost with the $1 an hour raise, especially if I get demoted because I can't keep my stoner friend in line. Jimmy tells me I've become a major bummer lately, and I'm tired of pedaling home smelling like something dredged out of the deep fat fryer, but I need the money. Thing is, Megan and I were on the outs before all this happened, and only hooked up that one time because we both got loaded at the employee picnic and started making out during the fireworks. And she'd gone off the pill because she thought it was messing with her complexion. And all I had was that rubber I'd been carrying in my wallet since sophomore year. So now I'm out of options. I've already sold my Xbox, my snowboards, and my dirt bike, and have nothing left except the broken down piece of crap Schwinn my uncle left in my grandmother's garage when he joined the Navy. I've known Jimmy since first grade, but it's really pissing me off that he's out there toking up instead of in here helping me carry the load. So I slam a box of veal down on the counter and throw another package of shrimp under the faucet to thaw. And I shove open the back door and I stand out in the parking lot and I yell, "Hey, Jimmy, why don't you get your lazy goddamn motherfucking pothead ass off the bucket and get in here and start peeling some goddamn shrimp before I fire your ass?" And he yells back, "Fuck you, dude, you can't fire me." And I slam the door shut and lock it so I'll have to come around front by Donnie's office. And I start wailing on veal like I'm a weapon of mass destruction. And pretty soon Jimmy starts pounding on the door, yelling for someone to open it. And I point my cleaver at Bridget and say, "Don't you dare open that door." And she swivels without a sound and heads back to her station. And Jimmy finally gives up and goes around front. And when he slinks by me a few minutes later and starts peeling shrimp, I slow down enough to think that if this is what it takes to make an extra $1 an hour, I'm not so sure I want to find out what it takes to make two. And then Jimmy pegs me with a shrimp peel and calls me an asshole. And I snap him with a rubber band from one of the broccoli bunches piled on the counter and call him a dickhead. And we get back to doing what it is we've always done, which is keeping our heads down and our hands busy until the magical hour when we can wipe down the counters and mop up the floors and scramble on out the door. I just noticed I use dickhead a lot in my poems. Wonder why that is.
No, why are they? Well, I mean, one of the things that these little vignettes, these little simple fucking experiences that anybody in a working environment has ever had. I mean, they're little metaphors of just existence, really, in a way. I mean, they aren't trying to be; they just fucking are. The way
Sure.
that things are, you know. I think, and that's what makes them such strong poems for me, is that they're more about. I mean, that simple, stupid poem full of dickheads and beetles and whatnot, more about work, about friendship, and about money, capitalism, and survival than it is about anything.
Right. Absolutely. You know, the whole premise is that Jesus, they kind of co-opt you, you know, and so you pay a little bit more for more responsibility, and the next thing you're trying to choose between your friends and getting paid and all of that sort of thing. So
right, right, yeah, they're like, you know, they're like little mini life lessons, and if a poem can't do that very effectively, then it's not a hell of a lot of a poem, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, to me, I want to get something out of a poem, something that has to do with humanity, even if it's viewing nature or whatever. You know,
sure.
One of the unlikely Kurt Sobolik poems I discovered when I was kind of going back through the catalog of stuff that I have is the Blue Mountain Lookout poem, and I don't know how many of those kind of poems you have found yourself pinning, which is just, you know, very much kind of a nature sort of a poem.
Right. I don't even know. I think that's probably on a floppy disk or something, other long gone computer or something.
Yeah, you don't need to read that one, but it's like, okay. How about the is it Grass Fed or the one where the father and the
oh, sure.
Yeah, is that what it's called? Is that
I think so. Can't remember my own titles, let alone Grass Fed. Yep. Okay. It's another long one.
Oh yeah. What the hell?
Okay. Grass Fed. I was lying in the weeds staring up at the clouds when my oldest walked up and said, "Mom said to check and make sure you weren't dead." And I said, "What's your diagnosis?" And she said, "Just being lazy." And I said, "Tell her I'll be down to help her move the animals in a minute." And she said, "What am I, FedEx?" And I said, "More like USPS on a slow day." And she said, "I don't know why we can't get cell phones like normal people." And I said, "I think you just answered your own question." And she said, "Whatever," and stomped back down to the house. I'd been resting my back for a minute, glad I'd finally put up the last of the hay, and I'd sort of gotten lost in the clouds. One minute I'd been thinking about the first dinger I hit in high school. We were already up by 5, but it still felt good. And the next I'd started thinking about my now deceased farmer-in-law warning my wife about communists when he put her on the bus for university. And a few years later telling me I was a fool for agreeing to teach on the reservation my first year out of school. I'd only lasted the one school year and was wondering how those kids had fared in the time since, when my middle child wandered up and flopped on the ground next to me and said, "What are you looking at, Dad?" And I said, "My past." And he said, "Boy, you must really be able to see far." And I said, "It all depends on your perspective." And he said, "Yeah, like that time we climbed up a blind man's bluff and I could see every place I've ever been." And I said, "Yeah, something like that." And then I said, "Hey, where are you going?" And he said, "I'm hungry." And I said, "What's for supper?" And he said, "That's what I'm fixing to find out." And I said, "That sounds like a good job for you." And I was going to follow him up, but just sort of nestled deeper into the long grass and started drifting with the clouds again. Next thing you know, I started thinking about moving onto the farm and not knowing foxtails from cattails and panicking the first time the baler broke, and how my mother-in-law had said, "Well, dear, you just start at one end and keep working until you figure it out. Them cows ain't gonna, them cows got to eat this winter." And I said, I know, and somehow found the fix with a lot of help from a neighbor. The relief I felt when that first bale slid onto the ground was almost as great as the moment my daughter gave her first cry. My wife hates that analogy, but it's true and makes me chuckle, which I was doing when my youngest child hippity hopped up and plopped herself down on my chest. And I said, "Oof, what's up, bunny rabbit?" And she said, "Mama said to go tell Walter Mitty those animals aren't going to move themselves." And I said, "You don't know what we're having for supper, do you?" And she said, "Mama said pork chops as soon as you cook them." And I said, "Did your grandma bake a pie?" And she says, "Yep, apple." And Mama picked some beans, but not the yucky kind. And I said, "Guess I better get on it then, hadn't I?" And she said, "Daddy, who's Walter Mitty?" And I said, "He's a character in a story who likes to daydream a lot." And she said, "Oh, will you read it to me?" And I said, "Sure thing, but we better check with your mama first." And then she said, "Is that what you like to do?" I said, "What's that, honey bunny?" And she said, "Daydream a lot." And I said, "Well, usually there's a lot more day than dream." And she said, "What does that mean?" And I said, "Oh, nothing. Just that it'd be nice to spend more time staring at the clouds." And she said, "But not now, because Mama needs those pork chops cooked." And I said, "That's right. Mama needs those pork chops cooked." And then I said, "Hey, you know what one pork chop at the grocery store said to the other pork chop at the grocery store?" And she said, "What?" And I said, "Do you chop here often?" And she giggled and said, "Come on, Daddy, I'm hungry." And I heaved myself up and said, "So am I, baby bunny, so am I. And we best get going before Mama says those animals, because Mama says those animals aren't going to move themselves."
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, I had a few missteps in there, but
No, it's just that those human conversations. Even though when I thought about that poem, I thought about the fact that he's lying out there in the pasture in the long grass and trying to just catch a little daydream and little free moment, Walter Mitty in it, and it's just he can't get away from
can't get it done.
Your poems just don't get away from all those people. They do sometimes. You spend time in your head. I think of that one from a long time ago. I like that poem, the Meteor poem.
Yeah, I have that if you want me to read it.
Yeah, why don't you read that poem?
Sure. Meteor. You're twisting, bending, pushing through your assembly line life, trying to remember to lift with your legs, eat enough greens, resist succumbing to the snake of morning traffic, the strain of beer belly against your jeans, the crick in your neck, the cacophony of telephone calls, emails, faxes beating their demands into your saturated skull. And you find yourself hoping for a sweetness on your tongue, a symphony for your ear, a rush of silk against your skin. Anything really to break up the monotony of spot welding hope to quiet desperation. And then early one morning, you're making coffee when the darkness surrounding you is lit in a startling flash of blue and white, and you wonder if the aliens have invaded or if you finally gone mad, and you forget about your coffee, shrug into your winter coat and boots, and start walking toward the horizon, looking for some remnant of brilliance, because now that you've seen it, you're not willing to let it go.
Go. Nice. I like that poem.
Thank you.
So I failed to set my stopwatch or know what the hell time it is, but I know we've been at this for a while. But is there a couple of others that you would like to share before we get the hell out of here?
Sure. You want two more or one more?
Yeah,
two.
About two.
Two. Okay.
Couple.
So this one is called Dungeons and Dragons. I liked rolling characters and the many-sided dice, but the campaigns were lost on me. I grew bored with the artificial thrust and parry, my imagination not vivid enough to equate action with a number on a die. I was never much of a monster or superhuman kid anyway, preferred Bugs Bunny and the antics of Wile E. Coyote to the Super Friends, usually changed the channel when the Masked Crusaders flew in. I was a simple kid, full of fear, knees perpetually skinned, two wheels spinning, playing card flapping in the spokes, moving nowhere and everywhere at once, each side street an infinity. Neil Armstrong had nothing on me. Encyclopedia Brown, the Great Brain, Conjunction Junction, what's your function? A 3-hour tour, the Iowa Basic, Rock'em Sock'em, Ganip Ganop, Psychiatric Help 5 cents, the Red Baron, Tetherball Champion of the World. I am the greatest, work my rope-a-dope on you. Where am I going with this? I don't know. Maybe I'm feeling oddly nostalgic, indefinitely misplaced. Life has its own chutes and ladders, fairy princesses, dungeons and dreams. You are your own superhero. Fight fire with backfire, swing from tree to tree, accumulate what hit points you can. Every adventure begins with one misstep. Roll with it, then roll again.
All right.
All right, so this last one, as you know, my mom died the first part of March, and I wrote a flurry of poems that I didn't know if I would ever, see, or if they'd ever see the light, but I figured I should at least read one into the record. So I didn't name any of them. I just figured I'll just call them all Mom. So this is this one, so. You weren't one of those old ladies who stuffed tissues in your bra, but I sure found them tucked every place else. Coat pockets, seat cushions, the compartment of your walker, tote bags, pant pockets, the pouches on your bed rails. Not sure why you had 20 little spiral notebooks with the same contact information written in all of them, but I found those too. Your social security card, oddly enough, I found in a folder labeled Social Security. This, after I looked every place else and didn't need it anymore. As it turned out, people were kind and having the number was enough. I kept your Tupperware, your pots and pans, the unopened bottle of ketchup. I'm stuck with your subscription to TV Guide. The religious paraphernalia I took to Goodwill to be born again by other thrifty Christians. I probably threw things away I shouldn't have, but how do you know? How much time should I spend pondering what to do with your toilet brush? Would it surprise you that heating up a TV dinner in your microwave makes me more melancholy than finding your grade school report cards or a teacup grandma left behind? I received the security deposit from your apartment today. The manager told me I was a good cleaner when I handed over the keys. She meant it as a compliment, but even if it looks it, there's nothing clean about letting go.
All right. Thanks, man. That was great. Nice ending.
Perfect.
Well, so are you thinking about anything else? I mean, has this little last endeavor into the world of publishing prompted you to consider possibly a follow-up?
I don't know. It's I don't know what do I do another, if I did, do I do another whole voice series, or do I use some of these other poems, or put them all together next time, or do I find anybody who actually wants to publish it, and all of those sort of things that you go through, right? So I don't know. I'm still I don't know. How's that sound? I don't know. We'll see.
Questions.
Yeah, I'll just keep writing as they come to me, and then we'll see what
idea,
how I feel. So,
well, hey, thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
I'm glad we have it in the archive. The poet Kurt Sobolik, and I guess I'll just say join us next week for another one of these episodes of Poets in Montana.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
A lifetime filled